his talk. I have been really looking forward to our guest speaker tonight and the topic that he brings to us. Um, I studied some music or was kind of a music buff myself and have an appreciation of music stemming from my studies of music during my younger years, and I do mean younger years. So, with that being said, and very worshipful Jeremy standing by, most worshipful Jim, would you please do the honors and with your normal super introductions that you do of our guest speaker and the topic for tonight?
Thank you, Worship Master. Not that long ago, I read an article about a production of the Magic Flute that was going to take place in Kansas, going to be put on by the Kansas City Opera Company, and they were determined to create a production by removing any allusions to Freemasonry from the production. Very quickly, so there were several critics who came on board and said, if you were to eliminate the allusions to Freemasonry from Mozart's Magic Flute, you would not have a Magic Flute. And so with that backdrop, it's my pleasure to introduce to you my friend, my partner in crime, if you will, at the Valley of Tacoma, the Valley of Tacoma Scottish Rite, illustrious and very worshipful brother Jeremy Yielding, who will enlighten us a little bit on tonight's topic, the Masonic allusions found in Mozart's Magic Flute. Jeremy, it's all yours.
Thank you, most worshipful and worshipful master. I greatly appreciate the opportunity to address the brethren of your lodge. So good evening, brethren all. So let me begin by saying, as I share my screen out here, let me begin by saying that if you're looking for musical scholarship that our worshipful master alluded to this evening, there are some excellent tomes out there that will be much more educational than what I'm about to show you. I'd point you to books such as the Masonic Thread in Mozart by Catherine Thompson, or Mozart and the Masons by Howard Landon. Can you guys see my screen?
Not yet.
Not yet. It's still waiting. All right, hang on.
Yeah, just want to make sure that you...
Sure.
It's coming up now.
All right.
Got it.
Good. Let me go over to the presentation. All right. So again, the Masonic Thread in Mozart by Catherine Thompson, or Mozart and the Masons by musicologist Professor Howard Landon. Excellent book, about 80 pages long. Really, really good. I am not an expert on musical theory in general or the Magic Flute in particular. I knew that the Magic Flute allegedly had Masonic themes, but I didn't know much more than that. But about a month and a half ago, most worshipful brother Jim asked me if I knew anything about the piece, and I had to admit that I really did not. But he planted a seed of challenge in the back of my brain, and this presentation is the fruit of that seed. Now, opera has never been a passion of mine. My mom loves it. In fact, she took opera voice lessons when she was a young lady. My wife adores it. When I mentioned to her that I was thinking of studying the Magic Flute, Wendy's eyes lit up. It's one of her favorite operas, but she never knew that it had any Masonic themes. So when she asked me to explain, I said in my most ominous tone that I could summon that I couldn't because Masons. But later I admitted sheepishly that the real reason was that I simply didn't know. I'd have to ask Dr. Google all about it. So tonight, you're going to be receiving the Dr. Google level of scholarship. Also, before I begin, I want to admit that I do not speak German, and my German pronunciation skills approach zero. So I appreciate your indulgence in advance. So let's talk about Brother Mozart. So Mozart had known about Masonry from an early age, being treated for smallpox at the age of 11 by a physician who happened to be a Mason, a Dr. Wolf. He was so grateful for the treatment that the child prodigy composed a short piece of music for the doctor's lodge. He joined a Viennese lodge, Beneficence Lodge, zur Wohltätigkeit, in December of 1784 and was raised shortly after in 1785. And many of his friends were Masons, and he even convinced his father Leopold to join the lodge in the opening months of 1785. In fact, when his dad Leopold Mozart joined, they had some sort of a special dispensation that allowed him to take all 3 degrees in the month of April. He did it in the span of about 3 weeks. It's worth commenting that music has always been intimately connected to the craft. Our monitor is full of odes and calls for music in the lodge room, and not just Pleyel's hymn during the funeral dirge. It would have been unusual for there not to have been music during a meeting. So here you have a brilliant composer with Masonic friends writing the lyrics and the librettos for some of his compositions, and it's natural that they would bring their talents to their lodges. This first composition geared for the lodge is said to have been written all the way back in 1772, according to the Kochel catalog, which is the inventory that was completed well after Mozart passed away, I think in about 1865. Though anything that's listed in that catalog before 1784 is debatable. That's a full dozen years before Mozart was initiated into the craft. And you'll see this notation, this KV, and it's for the Kochel catalog. And a neat pro tip is if you ever see something that's like KV 148 here, that I'll talk to in a bit, if you Google that number, just KV 148, you'll come across YouTube videos of the piece being performed. It's pretty neat. So he comes up with his KV 148, the octave Freiliche Johannes Lodge at the Ceremonial Johannes Lodge in collaboration with Ludwig Lenz, which has got some lyrics that should inspire us even today. Indulge me as I read these out. O sacred bond of friendship of true brothers, like the highest happiness and Eden's bliss, a friend to belief, never opposed to it, known the world over, yet full of mystery. Arise, Masons, and sing. Let the world hear us. It is the day to consecrate this song, a great, glorious day of honor, a great celebration of faith and unity. When the world becomes good-mannered, let this celebration be full of joy, well-being, and salvation. And where reason thinks and acts in freedom, let men share in our joy. So after he was admitted to the lodge, he wrote Lied zur Gesellenreise, or A Song for the Initiate's Journey, which is listed as KV 468, with Joseph von Ratschig providing the words. And he wrote this in about March of 1785, likely for the occasion of his father's initiation into his degrees. And a quote from that: "You who now approach a new level of knowledge," these are the lyrics to the song, "you who now approach a new level of knowledge, stay firmly on your path, knowing that it is the path of wisdom. Only the undaunted man can approach the source of light. O pilgrim, take for company the blessing of your brothers. Let caution be your companion. May a thirst for knowledge guide you. Question everything and never succumb to the delusion of ignorance." It'd be pretty cool to have a Mozart composition sung in your honor as you're going through the degree. He composes and performs Die Marderfreude, or Masonic Joy, in 1785 to honor Count Ignaz von Born, who is the master of Zur Wahren Eintracht, the True Concord Lodge, on the occasion of Worshipful Brother von Born receiving a knighthood. And KV 623, he composes the Little Masonic Cantata on November 15th of 1791 and performs it 3 days later, just a couple of weeks before his tragically early death. And we'll talk about this piece at the end of the presentation. But what we're here to talk about tonight is, of course, the Magic Flute, which is KV 620. Now, this is a Singspiel opera, which means that it's a comedic opera or done in the spirit of comedy. It was composed toward the end of Mozart's life, with fellow Mason Emanuel Schickenader writing the libretto, the story, and the lyrics. By the time of the composition, the libretto was completed, Mozart had been a Mason for about 7 years. It was first performed in Vienna on September 30th of 1791, with Schickenader playing one of the principal roles, and Mozart's sister-in-law playing another. Mozart, as I noted, passes away in early December, on December 5th, just as his opera is playing to packed houses. In fact, even after his death, the Magic Flute continues to draw capacity audiences through the middle of the following year. But before we begin our examination of the opera, it's important to think about how we'd like this presentation to go. So I'm going to try and explain the story and draw attention to some of the Masonic elements that are identifiable, easily identifiable. Interesting enough, though, the libretto, the story contained in the opera, has been critically seen as its least successful element, that the story had strange features that didn't seem to fit what was necessary to tell the tale. It's recently been argued that the libretto is best understood when viewed by someone equipped with Masonic background to better appreciate it. So we're going to look for these discordant elements and discuss them. There are a lot of allusions in the opera, so make note when we call things out, like how certain numbers seem to appear again and again. And I think you'll be surprised at how many we come up with by the end. And I'm certain that you'll find more in here than I've contemplated, and I'd be interested in hearing from you. There are brothers on this call, like Worship Brother Murphy, who are better suited to expound on this stuff due to their training than I am. So before we begin, I'd like you to pretend with me for a little bit. So imagine, if you will, you're sitting down to see the Magic Flute for the first time, live and on stage. You're sitting in either a pre or post-COVID theater about to watch an opera. The seats are comfortable, and there are folks settling in all around you. You know that this is going to be in a foreign language, so you figure you should read the program and get to know who's playing who and develop an idea as to what you're about to see. So brethren, let's meet the cast. So to start off, we have Tamino, who's the primary protagonist. He's a prince lost in a foreign land. We have Papageno, a bird catcher and a tall tale teller. He provides some of the comic relief that we see in this scene spiel. The Queen of the Night, who portrays a sort of an overprotective mother role, and a bit more. Pamina, the daughter of the Queen of the Night, and the object of our protagonist's affections. Sarastro, described at first as a demon, maybe he's a high priest, kind of a mysterious figure at first. And Monostatos, the chief of the slaves of the temple, who in the play is depicted as a Moor. And Papageno, a made-for mate to Papageno. All right, so note that the performers in these images may not always match the following slides in the presentation, so I get no points for continuity. Instead, I tried to get a variety of images that would best illustrate the story. I don't own the rights to these images or to the video clip that will play as part of the presentation. This is only for educational purposes, so I am claiming fair use. All right, so back to the theater of the mind. The lights have gone down and a hush falls over the audience, and the orchestra begins to play the overture. And the part that I want you guys to listen to is the very first part of the overture. Listen for the drum sounds of the very first chords. See if I can do this. I'm going to turn up my sound a little bit so you can hear it better. Did you guys catch those snare drums at the very start before the chord really began? Let's try that one more time. All right. So there's your very first Masonic allusion. The overture, the opera, the very first thing that we hear are three distinct notes, as if there were three great knocks, almost as if the entire opera is a portrayal of a degree of some kind. Let's go to the opening act. Oh, there we go. So as Act 1 opens, we see the young prince, Tamino, running for his life from a terrifying serpent. He has a bow, but he's all out of arrows. He pleads for mercy for the gods to save him and promptly faints. This seems to me an unusual story choice. Is the fainting symbolical of something, perhaps a transition or the rebirth into a different sphere of consciousness, or maybe all that will occur subsequently is a dream? This could have been a truly short opera if he'd fainted in front of a giant snake and the serpent were to eat him, but instead he's rescued by three ladies who appear in the nick of time. And they're not ordinary ladies. They're servants to the local ruler, the Queen of the Night. They take their 3 silver javelins and slay the beast. Finding the young prince in their mistress's domain passed out before them, they sort of ogle the young prince. Each in turn expresses their desires that the other two should go off and tell their lady about the young and handsome stranger that they've encountered. while the one left behind explores the possibilities with the passed out prince. But eventually, after some squabbling, the three leave as a group to inform the queen. Now, while the ladies are on their journey back to the queen, Tamino wakes up to the sound of panpipes and an unusually dressed man, Papageno, who's dressed up in camouflaging feathers with a bird cage strapped to his back, who wanders into the scene. Papageno introduces himself as the queen's bird catcher, and that he lives in a grass hut a little ways away from them. They're an odd couple, the prince and this very earthy bird catcher, this living symbol of a man in his most rough and natural state. Still, when Tamino sees the dead snake, he assumes that Papageno has killed it, saving his life. The birdcatcher does not correct the misperception and goes so far as to boast that he throttled the serpent with his bare hands. The three ladies returning to the prince overhear the lie and the boast and present the birdcatcher with the wages that he'd earned: water rather than his usual wages of wine, a stone rather than his usual wages of bread, and instead of coins, a golden padlock which they used to seal his lips for having told a lie. The three ladies showed Tamino a portrait of the beautiful Princess Pamina, the Queen of the Night's daughter. Tamino takes one look and he's smitten head over heels in love. Unfortunately, Pamina has been captured by Sarastro, the Queen's arch enemy, who is described by the three ladies as an evil fiend. So when the Queen of the Night arrives in person, along with an atmospheric clap of thunder, she asks Tamino to rescue her daughter. She explains that with the loss of her husband, she's powerless to stop Sarastro. If he can save Pamina, Tamino's promised her daughter's hand in marriage. The Queen's three handmaidens give Tamino a flute with magic powers that will protect him, and send Papageno along to help, along with a magic instrument of his own, a set of bells. In some texts, it's referred to as a glockenspiel. Before they depart, and after a bit of comedic near silence as Papageno still has the padlock keeping his mouth shut, the ladies unseal his lips, admonishing not to tell any more lies. And they say, "For if all liars received a lock like this on their mouths, instead of hatred, calumny, and black gall, love and brotherhood would flourish." So we have an admonishment right up front for truthfulness. Being ignorant as to how to get to Sarastro's lair, Tamino and Papageno are told that they'll be escorted to the temple by three young boys, noted to be beautiful, gracious, and wise, which sounds a lot like wisdom, strength, and beauty to me. Tamino and Papageno are admonished to heed their advice. So the scene then changes to the temple of Sarastro, where Pamina is being held. When we first see her, she's alone with the treacherous Monostatos, the chief of the slaves of the temple, who states his intentions of having his way with her. She rejects his advances and faints. Just then, Papageno, scouting in advance, wanders in through the window. He and Monostatos surprise each other as they peer over Pamina's fainting couch, each terrified due to the appearance of the other, and Monostatos runs off. Papageno tells a revived Pamina of Tamino's love and of Tamino's intention to rescue her. There's an interesting conversation where Papageno reveals to Pamina that he doesn't have a wife or a girlfriend, but Pamina reassures him that Providence will provide for one, and that men who feel love, a good heart is never lacking. They sing a duet about love, and the two of them head out in search for Tamino. Meanwhile, the three young boys, who again are beautiful, gracious, and wise, have guided Tamino through the forest. Now take a look at this image, and you see we've got this boat, on pelican, swan, take it as you may, but they're in this contraption. And in the notes for the libretto, it notes, and I couldn't find an image that showed this in a modern stage production, that this contraption is to be covered in roses, specifically in roses. And that, again, brethren, especially for those who are familiar with the Scottish Rite, may have an illusion for you all. So there's that. So let's see here. So the three young boys have guided Tamino through the forest. Tamino asks where he's being led, and the boys reply that they're taking him to the Temple of Wisdom. And he's led to a temple with three doors. The doors are marked Reason on the right, wisdom in the middle, and nature on the left. Again, my Scottish Rite brethren. They admonish him to be constant, patient, and discreet, and thus to be a man. Tamino tries the doors marked reason and nature, but is denied by the voices of unseen priests telling him to go back. Perhaps he's not ready for such advanced learning. Finally, the door in the middle marked wisdom opens to reveal the temple of the order. The order asks Tamino what he seeks in the temple, and Tamino tells him that he's after that which belongs to love and virtue. The order senses that what Tamino is actually looking for is trouble, and Tamino states that he wants death for the fiend Sarastro. The order explains that Sarastro is not the bad guy that he's been told that he is, and further states that the testimony of women is not to be trusted, and that, quote, a woman does little and chatters a great deal, end quote. The order affirms that Pamina is being held there, but cannot give the reasons why, because his tongue is bound by oath and duty. To find his princess and to understand why Sarastro holds Pamina there, the order informs Tamino that he must first join the temple's holy order. And he's quoted as saying, as soon as the hand of friendship guides you into the sanctuary to the everlasting bonds. So frustrated, Tamino asks if Pamina is still alive. And when the unseen priests respond that yes, she is still alive, Tamino busts out his flute and in the joy of his heart plays in tribute to the gods that she still lives. All these wild but docile animals appear to listen to the performance, and as he stops, the animals flee. Papageno hears the flute music and plays his own panpipes, and as Tamino hears the panpipes, he goes in search of Pamina and Papageno. As soon as Tamino runs off the stage, Papageno appears with Pamina, and they're both running from Monostatos, who has recovered from his shock from seeing the wild bird man and is in hot pursuit. Monostatos confronts them, almost apprehending them until Papageno plays his bells, and Monostatos and his henchmen become so entranced by the bells that they dance clear off the stage. Pamina and Papageno sing that only the harmony of friendship relieves hardships. Without this sympathy, there is no happiness on the earth. At last, Sarastro appears in a chariot drawn by 6 lions. He's represented in robes with the sun, the great luminary of nature, emblazoned upon them. Now, this is an interesting image. This is one of the cards that they use to kind of set up the costuming and the staging. And I would note that if you count the number of figures, human figures that we have here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, and there's an 18th one in here somewhere. There, I've counted 18 in here. So we've got that number 18 appearing again. And you'll also note the position of the hands of the priests looks an awful lot like something that we may be familiar with. Okay. So Pamina entreats with Sarastro, telling him of Monostatos' unwanted affections. Sarastro tells her to be a good cheer and tells her that love won't be forced upon her, and that the reason for Panima's imprisonment is then revealed. Sarastro is holding her for her own good until she can be guided by a man. Quote, a man must guide your hearts, for without him, all women tend to step outside their own sphere of activity, end quote. Monostatos reappears now with Tamino in tow, proud that he's caught the intruders and prevented Panima from escaping. Instead of being praised by Sarastro, he's punished with 77 lashes to the soles of his feet. Sarastro orders Tamino and Papageno to be brought into the temple for trial and purification. The pair have sacks put over their heads, they're hoodwinked, and are led into the temple. They must endure the rituals of purification as they're led in, and thus ends the first act. So that's Act 1. Act 2 begins near a temple surrounded by palm trees, and after a processional of 18 priests, Sarastro enters and gives the following oration. You servants, consecrated in the temple of wisdom of the great gods Osiris and Isis, with a clear conscience, I declare to you that our gathering today is one of the most important of our time. Tamino, the son of a king, has journeyed to the north gate of our temple. He wishes to tear off his veil of night and look into the sanctuary of great light. To offer him the hand of friendship should be our duty today. But even with this speech, which has got all kinds of Masonic allusion in it, Sarastro is questioned by the orator, who asks if Tamino possesses virtue, discretion, if he is charitable, and if he will undergo the harsh trials of initiation. All this being answered in the affirmative, Sarastro thanks the group for their assent to the initiation and explicitly states the reason for holding Pamina. The virtuous Pamina has been destined by the gods for Tamino, and it was for this reason that I seized her from her mother. So now the next section is heavy with Masonic allusion. Sarastro invokes a blessing to Osiris and Isis for the pair prior to their first trials, right? Before every great and important undertaking. Tamino and Papageno are permitted to enter the forecourt of the temple, which seems to resemble a room for candidate preparation. The sacks are removed from their heads in this dark chamber where the orator and the second priest arrive with their torches providing the only light. And in this fashion, they ask the candidate questions. What do you seek? Friendship and love is the reply from Tamino. Are you willing to risk your life fighting for them? Tamino answers yes. Are you willing to undergo every trial? Tamino states every one. The orator orders Tamino to give him his hand. They clasp hands and he exclaims, so be it. Now the second priest asks Papageno if he wants also to fight for the love of wisdom. And he replies that fighting isn't his thing, neither really is wisdom, and that as a child of nature, he likes sleep, he loves food and drink, and he wants to capture a pretty little wife. The priest tells him that he can't have those things unless he completes the trials, which are to comply with the rules of the order or face death. In the face of death, Papageno remarks that he'd rather remain single. The priest states that Sarastro has put aside an appropriate woman for him, a Papagena. Papageno is intrigued and wants to see this young, beautiful, and well-matched lady, and the priest says that he can see her if he doesn't speak to her. Tamino is admonished similarly not to speak to ladies. He will be permitted to see Pamina, but not to speak to her. The concept here is pretty simple. They are under an obligation that they want to have them fulfill, not because it will do harm to anyone, but because they have made the obligation. So when before the priests leave, they sing an admonition to the candidates to beware of womanly wiles. And so with the priest and their light-giving torches gone, Tamino and Papageno are again left in darkness. The three women of the Queen of the Night appear through a trap door and try to convince the pair to abandon the trials and realign themselves with the Queen. Tamino stands firm and convinces Papageno to stay silent. The priests arrive and adjure the three women to depart. Tamino and Papageno have passed the first trial. While Tamino and Papageno are at the temple going through the trials, Pamina has her own trials as she tries to escape Monostatos again. The Queen of the Night appears and commands her in an incredible aria that I will force you to listen to, that she must take a dagger and murder Sarastro to restore her family's power or be disowned. So bear with me as I bring this up. Come on, baby. That is some powerful stuff. So Sarastro appears at the end of that aria and puts a stop to the beating of the queen and Monostatos and Panema. Panema begs him not to punish her mother, and Sarastro simply implores God's blessing on Tamino's efforts in the trials, for by completing them, Panema will be married to him, and the queen will return to her castle. He then sings a rather Masonic aria himself. Within these sacred portals, revenge is unknown, and if a man has fallen, love guides him to his duty. Then, with a friend's hand, he walks, glad and joyful, into a better land. Within these sacred walls, where man loves fellow man, no traitor can lurk, because enemies are forgiven. He who is not gladdened by such teachings does not deserve to be a man. So back at the trials of Tamino and Papageno, they're admonished to keep silent. Now, Papageno is uncomfortable to silence. After all, his name means parrot in German, the Papagei. He's bored and thirsty and frankly undisciplined. So when an old woman shows up with a cup of water, he can't help but strike up a conversation and have a drink. Papageno asks her age, and the crone swears that she's 18 plus 2 minutes in age. Papageno makes an aside that she appears to be 118 and asks if she has a boyfriend. She replies that yes, she does have one, and his name is Papageno. She's about to reveal her name to him when a thunderclap sounds, and she flees. So the flute and the bells are returned to Tamino and Papageno by the three boys who guided them to the temple. Tamino plays the flute while Papageno digs into the food left by the boys. So while they're at this refreshment, Pamina hears the flute and goes to Tamino, who's still bound by his obligation of silence. Seeing her, he keeps playing and motions her to go away. She misinterprets this silence as a rejection of her. Pamina and Tamino are united again by Sarastro, who tells the two to say their farewells before the final trials. Papageno, having spoken to the old crone, is separated from Tamino at this point, and now stands outside of the temple, where he's confronted by the order. The order informs him that he'll never be admitted to their consecrated band because he has failed the trial. Papageno makes an interesting observation that there are other people like him out in the world, and that what he really wants now is a glass of wine, and one kind of magically appears out of the ground. The order asks Papageno what he really wants out of all the world, and Papageno states that he just wants a wife. The crone appears and offers him a way out. If he marries her, he can escape with her. If not, it's bread, water, and imprisonment. Papageno relents, if only to marry her until he can find something prettier, and upon making the promise of marriage, she transforms into the 18-year-old woman she said she was. Again, the 18 comes up. Unfortunately, they're not allowed to embrace as the orator, who has been watching this whole thing, is apparently very old-fashioned and states that Papageno has not yet earned his reward. The three boys reappear in a garden scene and sing a very enlightened verse. Soon, heralding the morning, the sun will shine forth on its golden path. Soon superstition will vanish. Soon the wise man will triumph. Unfortunately, they must first tend to Pamina. The final farewell that Sarastro arranged has convinced her that Tamino has forsaken her, and thus driven Pamina to the brink of suicide. She intends to impale herself with her mother's dagger, but due to that timely intervention by the three boys, who again are said to have wisdom, beauty, and grace, she's convinced by them that even now Tamino is facing his greatest trials to win her love. She asks to be taken to him, and we change scenes to the final trial. We find Tamino being led by two men in black armor into a scene depicting two mountains, one with a waterfall and the other pouring out fire. The armored men sing, "Whoever walks upon this path so full of troubles is purified by fire, water, air, and earth. If he can conquer the fear of death, he will soar from the earth up to heaven. Enlightened, he will then be able to devote himself wholly to the mysteries of Isis." Tamino hears Pamina calling to him, and they're reunited. The armored men allow Tamino to speak with her, and they're allowed to take the final trial together. And it's interesting here that Pamina is brought into the initiatic experience as they're united in love. She's even led into the scene by a priest. They're ready to face whatever may come, even death, together. So this reuniting of the two halves into one. Perhaps this goes to the idea that if your spouse is supportive, you can do anything. Pamina reveals that the flute given to Tamino was actually carved by her father from a 1,000-year-old oak in the middle of a lightning storm. And so it wasn't a product of the Queen of the Night, it was from her dad. So using the protecting power of the magic flute, they walk into the volcano spitting fire, and then up the mountain through a waterfall, enduring the final trial together. Once they've passed through these tests, a shining doorway into the temple appears, and they enter triumphant. While Tamino and Pamina complete the trials, Papageno, in his own despair at not being able to be with his lady, prepares to hang himself. The three boys appear again and tell him to stop being foolish, and admonish him to ring his bells to call his wife to him. The two are reunited, and Papageno learns the name of his wife is Papagena. The Queen of the Night, with Tamino joining forces of the temple, and even her bird catcher abandoning her, makes alliance with Monostatos, and promises him Pamina's hand. They, along with the three ladies, make a desperate last attempt to bring down Sarastro's temple, but they're defeated amidst frightening storms, and the queen vanishes into the darkness, banished into the eternal night by the forces of the light. Sarastro says, "The sun's rays drive out the night, destroy the ill-gotten power of the dissemblers." So again, truth over lies. The final chorus goes, "Hail to you on your consecration. You have penetrated the night. Thanks be given to you, Osiris. Thanks to you, Isis. Strength has triumphed, rewarding beauty and wisdom with an everlasting crown." So as the opera ends, Sarastro's mysterious but apparently benevolent order has prevailed, granting all power to beauty and wisdom. So before we wrap up and discuss some of the Masonic themes that we heard tonight, I'd like to go back to that final piece that Mozart composed before his death in December 1791. The Little Masonic Cantata was completed November 15th, performed 3 days later. Mozart had passed away, again, just a couple weeks later. The words of the libretto were composed by a brother. Professor Landon believes it to have been a brother by the name of Karl Gieske. And just again, you can search and go on YouTube and have this thing played. It's a neat piece of music, and it's pretty long. But one of the great lyrics, I think, is, "Come, brothers, give yourselves over entirely to the bliss of your feelings, that you may never forget that you are Masons." So, epilogue. Masonry thrived in Vienna. It was very popular, so much so that eventually the aristocracy ends up becoming worried, especially when certain Masons espouse the very enlightened views that in a really enlightened society, that there was no need for the monarchy at all. Masonry ends up being declared illegal in the Austrian Empire in June of 1795, about 4 years after Mozart's death, and all lodges would be closed for more than a century. Now the construction of the story, and a lot of the themes that we've heard are drawn from several different sources. We have Paul Ransky's Oberon, we've got Wayland's Jashanistan, and the Lulu ordered the Zebra Flute, which actually you get the title of the libretto, and the figures of Monostatos and the three boys appear in that. And then from the 12th century poem of Yvain, or Gawain, you get the initial scene of the serpent, the three ladies, and the appearance of a strange half-bird, half-man. And then the play Sethos provides the Egyptian setting that is usually depicted in this play. So let's open it up a bit for discussion. So what did you guys see and hear? Anything that struck you that especially Masonic, that I haven't called out? And I'll just put some stuff up that I saw as I was going through the opera. So what do you guys think? Please unmute yourselves and let me know.
Well, I'll start. I was struck by the frequency of the number 3. It just kept coming up over and over again. I believe you had mentioned the 3 knocks, and I still remember we actually had a presentation on the Magic Flute in our lodge once, and I remember the first time I heard the knock come through, I was getting ready to clap, and my friend Greg Carroll said, "There's two more coming." I'm going, "Oh goodness!" So the preponderance of that. Abby, you are our resident opera aficionado here. I'd love to hear from you.
Not really an aficionado, more of a novice. It's wonderful presentation. I think a lot of really important themes here. Yeah, I'm just struck by all of this knowledge that's hidden and weaved into the story. So I really picked up a lot and learned a lot from this.
The one thing I noticed were the three gates. Is symbolic, I think, of the east, south, and west. That struck me as that's so Masonic. And I know that was very early on, but anyway, I saw that as a major piece.
I picked up on the preparatory questions and the obligation of silence toward women. That really hit a chord with me.
Absolutely.
And also the homage to Egypt, and to in a way of tying that back to biblical times, in a sense, to pyramids and Osiris and the gods.
And I think if I'm kind of tracking here, is that there's a lot of fascination back at that time with tying stuff back to the greater mysteries, right? For the old time stuff. And so you get that. You see, I think a lot of us have probably seen that illustration where the person is being raised by in sort of like in a sarcophagus sort of a setting with somebody with a lion's mask on. It looks very, very Egyptian. So, yep.
Back to those three doors. The one on the left was nature, the one in the middle was wisdom, and the one on the right, could somebody remind me?
Oh, let me move this off of here.
It was
We got reason.
What struck me about that was a lot of times, and this is before I became a Mason, we try to just go with the flow of nature and sort of figure things out on our own, or just let things go as they are. And then sometimes we try to figure things out with reason, but the door that worked and was the correct door was the wisdom, and that requires study and work.
Yep, and remember too that both Papageno and Tamino were admonished, follow the advice of those three boys, the wisdom, strength, and beauty kids, and they told him directly, hey, go to the Temple of Wisdom. So where does he try? Well, he tries reason, and he tries nature. So eventually he gets it right. So that's good.
I go back to my introductory comments about the Kansas City Opera, saying that they were going to eliminate all Masonic allusions from the Magic Flute. And when you go back to that list of just that partial list that you had, try eliminating all of those. And it's like, okay, you got no show. you just really don't have a show if you eliminate that stuff.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting. I read a couple of different articles. Again, Dr. Google talking that we had the allusions to the four different elements represented here. We have Papageno with his birds and with his pan pipes and everything else. Real simple, profane, natural man, but he's symbolical of the air, right? And he talks a lot. We have Sarastro, of course, wearing the sun. He's the Hierophant of the sun, the symbolic of fire. Pamina is the sort of the creative element, and maybe even the Queen of the Night as well, symbolical of water. And Monostatos being really vital and sort of lustful, being symbolical of the earth. There's a lot of political stuff happening in Vienna at that time too, and so people have also interpreted the Queen of the Night to have been the very autocratic Empress Maria Theresa. Some have interpreted it as Mozart throwing shade on the Catholic Church, but I don't think that's accurate because Mozart was a very devout Catholic. But Tamino is also seen as being the good Emperor Joseph, who they really liked and was very tolerant of the Masons. And Tamino, of course, is the Austrian people wanting to be united with the good Emperor Joseph. So that's also kind of cool.
Well, Jeremy, as always, thank you so much for sharing with us. My understanding, will you be presenting this again at the next Tacoma Scottish Rite educational night?
Because I am lazy, yes, that is correct.
So I noticed we have some brethren here from the Richland area. I hope that you'll share the fact that this presentation will be made available again on Tuesday. The what? I lose track of my days.
It's going to be it's a second Monday, isn't it?
Second Monday. Thank you.
Second Monday of the month.
Second Monday in November.
Yeah.
But before we wrap things up, Jim, David, or let me see, there was one more. Yeah, Jim or Dave, do either of you have any questions at all? Are you all?
I don't have any questions. Everything's working here. But I did just come up with a number system here. You have the three ladies, the three lances, the three boys, and then you have the one protagonist. So that gives you 10. If you've seen John Lawson's Stages of the Kabbalah lecture, there's 10 points on that as well.
Yep. That absolutely, that's a great point. You also have that number 18 keeps coming up, and the number 77 keeps coming up, and there are some symbols that may be more familiar to the brethren of the Scottish Rite that aren't appropriate to be discussed in blue as well.
Like I said, that just suddenly at the last second with the last screen, it just flashed right at me. I was like, wait a minute here, hold it.
Amazing what's right in front of us sometimes. Any event, like I said, Jeremy, I want to thank you again for joining us. This is the second time you've been with us, and so you sharing with us is most appreciated. It's nice that we can, even in a Zoom setting, learn a little bit about about our craft, and in this case, also one of our more celebrated brethren.
And brethren, just as the last word, if I can do it, y'all can do it, because again. Masonic or musical novice here. I the only German bands that I've ever listened to is been like Rammstein or something like that. So that's my expertise.
Hey Jeremy.
Yes, Bill.
Having been an Air Force musician for 12 years, I got a chance to play in several symphonies from Alaska to New Orleans and so on. And I've only played that twice. And what you came up, I learned an awful lot that I thought I knew about everything there was about Mozart, but there again, I was wrong again. But it's quite an interesting piece of music.
Absolutely, and if I could just share just one more time before I zip out of here, because I don't know what the heck I'm talking about when it comes to this stuff. I did capture some notes on some really smart people that did know what they were talking about this stuff. In the musicology of this, these are musical things that Mozart did that sort of brought Freemasonry into his music. They talk about the tied notes in suspension and the descending pairs of slurred notes that Mozart uses to denote the mystic tie between brothers, using parallel thirds and sixths and rising interval to major sixth, and then dotted rhythms to mimic ritual knocks. So all that is all kind of built into the music, and so he's building Masonic symbolism into the tune, which is pretty cool. I've also got a whole bunch of references. If anybody wants this stuff, if they want to do some additional research, please. You can go down a whole lot of rabbit holes, and they're fun to go down. So there you go. All right, stopping sharing, shutting up. Good night, guys. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Jeremy.
Thank you, Jeremy.
Thanks, Jeremy.